Hello, I'm Nadine Dereza and welcome to today's Royal Television Society's programme on how the creative industries have embraced both live streaming and streaming in general. And for this show, we've lined up three great speakers to talk about the opportunities and challenges within the streaming and pay-per-view sector. And we'll be primarily focusing on the music business and theatre industry. So over the next 60 minutes on Full Stream Ahead, we'll be finding out about the different types of virtual events and programs that have been successful and have delighted and engaged audiences, including a spotlight today on the National Theatre. And we'll also talk about how the pandemic has changed the marketplace, because we've gone from artists playing pianos and guitars in their front room to performing high quality ticketed live streams in a relatively short period of time, although behind the curve when you compare it to the gaming industry. And are these changes we've seen over the last year short term, or are they here to stay? And if so, why? Well, I've definitely become aware of more and more artists concerned about their environmental impacts of touring, notably Coldplay and Radiohead spring to mind. And also streaming as a business model, I suppose, as a way of sidestepping the recent visa fiasco for touring artists in Europe. And that's another programme in itself. And we're seeing an unprecedented period of innovation and experimentation, which we're going to explore today with Media Research and Live Now. Throughout this live broadcast, please do send in your questions, comments and thoughts. I'll be putting some of your questions to the speakers later on. And also be interesting to find out your views on what impact that you think live streaming in particular could have on the TV industry. And do you think streaming is indeed coming to the rescue of the creative industries, or is it an important part of the overall mix, or both? So wherever you're watching us in the world today, we would love you to take part in the show. And you can do that by texting in your questions for the panel through the YouTube chat. And if there's a specific speaker you'd like the question to go to, then jot their name down alongside the question to make sure I direct it to the right person. And I'm delighted to say that the speakers joining us for Full Stream Ahead today are Mark Mulligan, who's the Managing Director and Analyst at Media Research. Just gave us a little wave there. Welcome to you, Mark. As well as James Sutcliffe, who's the Chief Marketing and Content Officer from Live Now. Thank you, James. Welcome to you. And completing the lineup is Lisa Berger, the Joint Chief Executive at the National Theatre. Lisa, welcome to you. So welcome, Mark, James and Lisa to the programme. It's fantastic to have you all on board today. And we're going to start today's Full Stream Ahead by setting the context for virtual concerts with Mark Mulligan from Media Research, which is a market intelligence and consulting firm with expertise in the entertainment and digital business. And Mark is a long-term media and technology analyst and a leading thinker on the music industry's digital transition. And he works with global media, technology and device companies, and has over 15 years experience of doing so. Now, he heads up their music research and is the author of Awakening the Music Industry in the Digital Age, which apparently is a definitive account of the rise of the digital music market. Although I haven't read it, Mark, but I'm sure it is a jolly good read. And today, Mark is going to talk about the global pandemic and how it thrust the live music sector into chaos. But over the last year, we've seen a whole new virtual concert ecosystem created, with virtual concerts representing, I think, an entirely new business proposition, and one with potentially exciting prospects if done well. So to tell us more about that and so much more, welcome to the programme, Mark, and it's over to you.
Thanks for having me. Okay, so I'm going to run through a presentation which will hopefully give you a view of where live streaming of concerts is now, and where we think it's going to go, and also how audiences are behaving. So it's interesting, Nadine, you're talking about the contrast between the sort of the struggles which the traditional live sector went through, which was sort of almost like a parallel universe to the boom that happened within the live streaming business. we've seen how COVID and the lockdown era has affected so many media businesses, and some ways positive, some ways incredibly negatively. Some of the changes which have happened, particularly the ones which are likely to outlast lockdown, are ones which were already getting going before. There were transformations in consumer behavior or technology, which were already getting going, and essentially COVID acted as an innovation catalyst. Live streaming, though, was not one of those. So live streaming of music concerts had really been sort of never really got out the starting blocks, despite lots of very concerted efforts. And there were two key reasons. Number one is it's incredibly complicated from a rights perspective, and indeed the vast majority of the live stream concerts which you will have seen have not been paying the rights. They've been putting the money aside to pay it when they can get it sorted out at some time, largely because most of the licensing frameworks weren't yet in place and still are not fully in place. So that bit held it back. And then the other bit is the traditional live sector really didn't want to enable competition to come in and disrupt it, and so managed to hold at bay much of that innovation. So when the live streaming business really got thrown into the spotlight with the cessation of the traditional live sector, it was a real scramble. The companies who'd been plugging away hard, trying to make this market work, essentially swimming upstream against the current, suddenly found that all of their preparation could suddenly manifest, whereas a whole bunch of new companies suddenly came into the space. So what I'm going to show you on this slide now is that when we try to map the marketplace, it's actually really complicated. Because when one of the things we do at Media is we map a lot of industries and sort of break them down to which are the key competencies, etc. The reason it's complicated in the live streaming sector is because so many of these companies are trying to do so much. So many of them are trying to be, if not end to end, then certainly catering for a lot of what in the traditional live sector is done by very discrete sets of companies. There will be a degree of specialization that will come. And many of these companies only came into existence last year, and the law of averages of startups, particularly within music tech, means that a lot of them will not go the distance. We will certainly see the ones which are focusing on quality of experience rather than necessarily scale of experience will probably also be the ones which have a sort of a longer life in this sector. The other thing I'd take away from this is there are really two key ways to think about virtual concerts. There's the live streaming, which we're mainly going to be talking about today, but also virtual concerts within games. And games are very much becoming essentially new venues of tomorrow. Now, it doesn't mean all games. It's way harder to put on a game in a live concert in an authentic way inside FIFA, for example, than it is to an extensible world like Roblox or Minecraft. But we will see a lot more innovation coming from this space. The record labels and artists and management are all busy trying to work out how they can optimize themselves for gaming environments. Sony Music, one of the big record labels, even has a division making avatars for its artists. So there will be more happening in the game side, but that's more of a long-term future. What is happening now is very much within the live stream space, within sort of streaming of concerts. Even some of the entities which were doing virtual reality in the past have now sort of focused much more on doing sort of more traditional live streaming. And what we can see in the next slide is, even though there's been a huge amount of interest, we've certainly seen an acceleration of artists putting on concerts of all different shapes and sizes, and to be frank, different levels of professionality. It's still a fairly small audience. So what we're looking at here is some of Media's consumer survey data, looking at across at where live streaming was in terms of people who are doing it in Q3. That's the grey bar, and then Q4 is the blue bar. So it's growing, but it is still small. You're looking at less than 10% of consumers who are doing this on a sort of a semi-regular basis. That's compared to about 19% of people who would normally go to a concert. And the other thing that is crucial here is that where as there is some significant variation from country to country, it is not dramatic. Normally, when you have something at a fairly early stage of adoption, you see a more diverse range of penetration rates across countries. So what that suggests to us is, so far, live streaming of concerts has found a reasonably similar audience across multiple markets. It's essentially a sort of a fairly definable, fairly recognizable segment of consumers that transcends borders. And looking into the next slide, when we sort of deep dive into some of the behavior, we see this a good degree of sophistication already happening. You know, you can see that the roughly 2/3 of people who watch live stream concerts are watching more than one in a 3-month period, so that, you know, reasonably regular, and they are you know, good number of them are buying merch, watching with someone else. And I think it's that bit, the yellow ball saying 4% watch with someone else. Although that is small, we think that's going to be a really important part of the future of live stream concerts, because really going to a concert is a social experience. And the whole thing about on-demand experiences is they tend not to be social. You know, so people may be trying to make them social by having Discord open, or, you know, or FaceTime or something alongside. We saw the Gorillaz selling, you know, sort of multiple tickets where you could, you know, sort of bring your friend in with you. We think that's going to be a really important part of the future of concerts. The other thing, if we're looking on the next slide, is when we look at the demographic split and the age, then comparing it to real world concert attendees versus live stream concerts, the most significant thing here is that it is much more of a male skew. And this is typical of any new technology. New technologies, the early adopters of new technologies, tend to be younger and they tend to be male. So that tells us that 9% or so of people who are doing this, yes, it's small, but it is a sign of an early stage. This is not this is 9% and it's going to stay here. This is 9% with a lot of potential of going bigger and further and having a more mainstream reach. And to really tap into the mainstream side of things, in this next slide, really trying to explain here that this is really sort of a vision for what the future infrastructure of a live stream concert space could look like. Now, we don't really have an infrastructure at the moment. What we have at the moment is a whole bunch of competing companies all doing different things. We think there's a couple of things that really need to happen. One is, if live stream concerts are going to have a long-term future, they need to start thinking about some of the essence of what makes a traditional concert work. So you think about the things. So one is scarcity. If you miss your favorite band playing in town, you might have to wait another year or two before you get to see them again. With live stream concerts, if your favorite band is playing every night or every Friday and they're not doing any geofencing, then they become this entirely ubiquitous format rather than something that's scarce. And inherently, that changes the way that people perceive the value of it. So we think that also having some sort of, you know, capacity type approach with different sort of size virtual venues. But perhaps the most important thing is we think the quality of the experience, and thinking about live stream concerts not as the future of live, but the future of a new video format. And in that way, it's something which could potentially be to live music what TV is to sports. You know, opening up a much bigger global audience, the armchair audience, opening up whole new licensing revenue models. And then, you know, going into the next slide, that could start unlocking really meaningful paid ticketing revenue, you know, whether it essentially becomes a new pay-per-view format that pay TV operators, SVOD platforms, you know, whoever it might be, you know, can participate in. And so we firmly believe that, you know, over the course of the next few years, live streaming will learn to coexist and complement the traditional live business. And so a few thoughts I'd like to leave you with on the last slide. So first of all, is when we think about what has happened so far with how the decline in the traditional live business has impacted the live space, the bigger companies have been able to do things like getting bridge financing from Saudi princes, but small little venues don't have that benefit. And when they open, and they will likely have to open with smaller crowds, etc., it's going to be really hard for many of them to survive, let alone those that have already gone. Now, that means there's going to be a gap at the bottom of the ladder for small artists trying to build their audiences. That's a gap which live streaming could fill. And on the next bullet point, the other key thing is that virtual events, as I say, could be to live music what TV is to sports. So let's think about this not as a replacement for live. Let's think about this as a new format that can be licensed to whatever video or TV platform is out there. And on the next bullet, what we see is that live streaming needs to innovate the experience. You think about the Billie Eilish concert, where there's lots of augmented reality and there's lots of virtual fan experiences. That's the sort of thing which a Billie Eilish fan would still want to go and see, even when she's back on the road, because they cannot be replicated in the real world environment. And the next bullet, we see that there's an opportunity for big artists and labels to create high production value premium events. Drift here in the UK has done a really good job of building in really high production values into the experience, rather than simply just plonking a band in an empty venue and hoping that just the performance alone carries it. And finally, in the last bullet point, this is an opportunity to create a new value chain as well. A value chain which will be different from the traditional one, that will have different players. You might have completely different entities. I mean, if games ends up becoming a really meaningful new set of venues for the future, then you might even have games avatar agencies as part of the future value chain for live music. So my final thought on all of this is there's no taking away the disruption that the pandemic has had on the live business. The revenues which live streaming has generated are incredibly small compared to traditional live business. Artists and venues and promoters and everyone across the value chain has really felt the pain of what will be coming on for possibly a year and a half plus of disruption by the time venues really start to open again. But the future should be thinking not just about live streaming as being something different or something competing. It's something that complements. We could have hybrid events. We can have post-event video on demand assets. I think this is just a really exciting time where COVID accelerated everything, and now we're really ready for, if that was a warm-up lap, the race now really starts. Okay, back over to you, Nadine.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Interesting points that you raised there, and also that crucial gap for emerging markets. I know you've written a report about this, but if you're talking about the larger players having the larger spaces that they're used to, and the funds and the budgets to be able to create these amazing ticketed events, it's those emerging markets, those emerging artists, that we need to cater for. So you think live streaming and emerging markets go hand in hand? There's potential there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly as a lot smaller venues have already been struggling, and the likelihood is more might go. There's been a number of entities which have been looking to essentially roll up some of those smaller venues. So, that has some negative connotations, but it might mean that they have a lifeline. But I think it's reasonably safe to assume that there will be fewer small live venues in the short to mid-term future than there are now, unfortunately. So those younger, newer artists who are just trying to build their audience, they will really benefit from having a circuit of virtual small venues, if you like. There is, though, an important cultural aspect to this, which is, however good a virtual concert might be, there's nothing for replacing the experience of actually performing in a real venue. And I'm not just talking about that from the perspective of the audience. Think about it also in the development of the artist. The artists, when they put in the hard yards, going up and down the country in a beaten up van, playing some cold, wet place on a Tuesday night where there's only sort of 10 people in the audience, that's where they learn their craft. That's where they learn to be performers. Those are what makes them be able to, somewhere down the line, play to 5,000 people. And so there is a risk that if we have 2 or 3 years of smaller venues not being there at the same scale for smaller artists, even if live streaming gives them that platform, they may not be the same type of performing artist 3 or 5 years down the line.
And live streaming, though, the figures are amazing. I noticed the dip, though, in 2022, which takes into account that people want to go back out live, but then the live streaming business model takes off again. Interesting about the split between the genders, the male early adopters. I mean, Phil, my producer, we were having a chat about this yesterday, and he said, do you know what, if Take That did a high quality ticketed event suddenly the female demographic would shoot up and you may see a little bit more parity. That was his thought, by the way. I don't necessarily agree with that. But it is interesting how, you know, men in particular with gaming, they have got used to that. And obviously, you know, one of the things that took me by surprise, but not the gaming industry, was the US rapper Travis Scott had 12 million players logging into Epic Games Fortnite to watch the in-game concert last April. So it's amazing what can be done if it's done well.
Yeah, I think games is particularly interesting for music. If you look at the, you know, the most ardent gamers, the ones who spend most time gaming, the ones who spend most money gaming, they are also huge music fans. In fact, they spend more time streaming music than the average music subscriber does. They certainly spend a lot more time streaming music than the average consumer does. So they are really ardent music fans. You know, most people have probably seen that Twitch, the game streaming video platform, has been making some sort of meaningful moves into music over the course of the last year or two. And that's because it's just a really natural intersection of the audiences, even before you think about, you know, the appeal of having artists, you know, in games. There is one other thing which I think was crucial about that Travis Scott performance, and that is the amount of virtual merchandise which he sold. Unfortunately, the industry term "virch" does seem to be coming common parlance now, so I will succumb to industry pressure and call it virch. But that is potentially a really strong incremental revenue opportunity, you know, for artists, because there's so many types of products and formats which you can sell in there which you can't sell in the real world. You know, a dance, an emote, a skin, you know, these are sort of the types of virtual products which game players will pay a premium for, because within that context, within that environment, it is about who they are. It's as much about identifying them as somebody wearing a t-shirt from having to go and see a band on tour.
Thank you, Mark. And obviously keep your questions coming in for Mark and our other speakers. Mark will be joining the panel discussion later on. Thank you. That was Mark Mulligan. So let's now turn our attention to Live Now, which was launched in 2020 by Acer Ventures. And I know Live Now is aiming to build the world's biggest live content pay-per-view network, offering both live and on-demand content from the world of sport, music, comedy, fitness, and culture for global audiences. And leading their global marketing and content strategy is James Sutcliffe, who is supported by teams in Italy, the UK, and the United States. And James, I know, is busily building a content slate through rights acquisitions, co-productions with brand partners, and original formats created in-house. Now, James brings a wealth of experience to the party, joining Live Now from Monster Energy, where he initially led the EMEA music strategy for the company's portfolio of brands. And at the time, he signed key partnerships with the likes of Stormzy, Elro, and Live Nation, before becoming marketing director, connecting Monster's portfolio to key audiences through culture. I'll just highlight one of the partnerships. That was with Lewis Hamilton, that he oversaw. Lewis Hamilton, of course, Formula One world champion, I think 7 times over now. But before we hear from James, just to maybe get you off your seats and into the virtual concert groove, Live Now have compiled a lovely sizzle reel featuring some of the high-profile events they delivered last year, including Dua Lipa's Studio 2054 virtual concert, which drew in an impressive 5 million viewers. Yes, 5 million viewers. So let's take a look. Wow, that brings back some happy memories, James, because I bought a ticket to the Gorillaz Song Machine Live and had a great time in the process with my mate, Hillary. I don't know if she's watching. She's probably at school now, but she'll probably watch this programme on demand. And we danced our socks off that night. We loved it. James, I mentioned earlier on that Live Now is so much more than just music concerts, but it's the music industry that's going to be your key focus for us today. So, James, welcome to Full Stream Ahead.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So yes, thanks, Nadine. And as Nadine mentioned, Live Now is part of the Ace Ventures group. And on the next slide, you'll be able to see the businesses that make up our group. Ace Ventures started, founded by our chairman, Andrea Radrizzani. And amongst the group are a various number of sports media businesses, of which Live Now sort of nestles there. You'll see between Leeds United Football Club, amongst others. And it was, the business of Live Now is an important part to note here, is that it wasn't actually founded as a reaction to the pandemic. The ambition for the business has always been to try to replicate what happened in the sports industry and what we witnessed over several years of the way that the sports business was changing the way that consumers consumed and got involved with sports content. And Live Now was born out of that, and the plan and the ambition for the future of Live Now is to not replicate the live experience. It's very much to be part of the conversation and actually layer over, and we'll get to that in a little bit more detail further on. Now, with regards to the sports industry, if we look at the next slide, one area of sports that has really, captured the imagination of the armchair viewer is boxing, and more recently MMA and the UFC. And the challenge was, around the time that the business was being conceived, was how do we change the paradigm and how do we change the way that the entertainment business is essentially structured, and how do we get people to get involved with music and entertainment content in the same way that the armchair fans around the world will tune in to watch a boxing fight. There's 80,000 people will go to the stadium and watch in person, but then there's a huge global audience around the world, that have that appointment to view at whatever time of the morning or night that fight happens. People will pay their $20 or £20 to tune in. And so the challenge was, and the question was, how do we do this in music and entertainment? And on the next slide, you'll see, the genesis of this idea and the genesis of our business and how we first started. And so after, setting ourselves the challenge and coming up with the business plan and the business idea to launch, we started tentatively supporting the Global Citizen One World Together at home concerts. And there was reference earlier to artists playing in their kitchens and in their lounges. And during the first lockdown, before we see what we see now in terms of live streaming, artists were very much performing from home in this way. And many of you will no doubt remember those early performances. And then we moved into our first standalone event, which was with Ellie Goulding at the V&A. And this was our first foray into, standalone event that was then broadcast to millions of people in multiple different time zones across different countries. And if we move on to the next slide, you'll see then that what we then developed out of that, and the plan really started to kick in, was developing our business model and developing how we're going to monetize our business. Content that fans love essentially drives our business. We deal in premium live content, and on the screen you'll see some of the key areas in which we are monetizing our business through pay-per-view tickets and subscriptions, through e-commerce and merchandise, through sponsorship and media, through brand partnerships, and also through VOD and licensing. And if we move on to the next slide, you'll see some of the events that we have done since those first couple of shows, and since the Ellie Goulding show. We then really started to scale. We moved into our next event, which was with Dua Lipa, which Nadine mentioned at the start. Was watched by 5 million viewers in over 170 countries, by far and away the biggest live stream of last year, and also the jewel in our crown as a business. And what that did was allowed us to really start to open up doors in the industry as people started to understand and realize what this business could be and what live streaming could really deliver for artists and for fans. We also did a show with the Gorillaz, which Nadine said she had a great time watching with her friend. This was a slightly different spectacle in that we did 3 live shows back to back over the course of 2 days for 3 different time zones. There was a whole load of different tech and VR and hologram technology that we brought to the party on this one, which really started to show our abilities as a business to really kind of bring in new technologies. And then we moved into a show with Tong and the Ibiza Classic Orchestra from the O2. This was a slightly different setup in that this was actually in an empty venue. It brought us something different. The other 2 shows that we'd done previously had been in studios. And coming up at the end of March, on the 30th of March, we host our next global live stream with Maroon 5, who have been out of action for a while, and actually before this, they hadn't even played together for well over a year. And so when they do the show for us on the 30th of March, it will be the first time that they've actually stood on a stage together and performed. And so for them, it's given, a global artist of over 20 years in the business, that feeling of being able to get back together and play. If we move on to the next slide, for us, the great thing and the beauty of what we've been doing is obviously being able to provide artists with a platform to perform and to market themselves during a lockdown. And we've actually found that, and a lot of the conversations I've been having is that record labels are now starting to look at these streams as marketing tools and as marketing vehicles as part of bigger campaigns. Lipa, for example, after the Studio 2054 stream, her album Future Nostalgia jumped 15 places in the album charts, which just shows the incredible marketing power of this as a vehicle. And it's not just replace it. It's not about putting on a live show because an artist doesn't have anywhere to play and doesn't have a live tour to play. They're seeing the value in actually working with us to use this as a platform, much the same way as music videos used to do to help launch a single or as part of an album cycle. And so when live returns, for us, it's about how we make sure that the live streaming model complements and works with the physical events. And there's a few things that have been mentioned already on the show today with regards to kind of tactics and technology sort of things that can help complement and give fans an experience through streaming that they just can't get from the physical performance. And things like meet and greets, we've got on our platform a technology called Watch Together. It was mentioned earlier, the Gorillaz show in particular was where this really started to really kick in. Was you could buy a group ticket and you and 4 friends can watch in a private watch room and all talk to each other whilst the show's going on. And it also allows us to do virtual meet and greets in that way as well, and drop an artist into the fans watch room, which is just something that you'd never get to do in real life. Merchandise has been mentioned as well, and through our platform we have an e-commerce capability that allows artists to sell bespoke merch and obviously huge revenue stream for artists in the real world anyway is merchandise. And we enable the user to buy merch whilst they're watching the show. They don't have to leave our platform to do so. It's all native. And also things like behind the scenes documentaries, we're able to, for VIP packages, VIP tickets, we can provide extra content that sits before and after a show that allows fans, the ability to kind of see the making of, or behind the scenes footage. So there's lots of different ways that we're now starting to work into the future of how we stay relevant, and also how we kind of layer over the live experience. If we move to the next slide, it's been mentioned already about the the environmental impact of streaming, and bands like Coldplay and the 1975 and others have mentioned, about the fact that when they return to live, the environmental impact of what they do is high on their agenda. And many artists are actually, working with sustainability consultants and talking about how they have less of an impact on the environment when they do get back to touring. And it's interesting to note that 33% of an event is, the carbon footprint is by the fans, and 34% is from the venue itself. And there's artists talking about going on global tours next year where they want to ensure that their touring party is carbon neutral. And actually the main carbon output and footprint will be from the fans themselves. And so with live streaming, and a lot of the conversations I'm having at the moment with artists who are going on to tours in 2022 and beyond is where we can partner with them to bring their show to a global audience outside of the full arena that they have in front of them, that not discourages people to come and see them in person. They want to perform to their fans, and they want to perform to as many of them as possible. But if you don't have to get on a plane to fly, across countries or across borders to go and see them, you've got the opportunity to watch from home with extended footage, extended experiences, other kind of angles and points of view that still give you a great experience. And when the artist does come to your country or to a city near you, then of course, get on a plane, get on a train and go and see them. But this is about the future, and this is about sustainability, and as much as it is about money. And I think that's a really important point to end on, because it's going to be important for not only the future of the business, but the future of the planet as well, to ensure that, the touring and the way that the old model and the amount of movement that is, part of a live tour is reduced, and we do start to think about our impact on the environment too. Back to you, Nadine.
Thank you very much, James. Yes, it's a really neat business model, actually, because it satisfies that growing demand that people want to be more sustainable and more environmentally conscious, and those artists as well are leading it too. Now, I know, of having seen the Gorillaz output, and you said about the 3 shows, these kind of things don't just happen overnight. And I know one of your colleagues who I sort of follow on LinkedIn, I could see that it was a good 2 or 3 months of hard work involving a lot of people to create the magic that we saw. So what is actually the biggest challenge in putting on live stream events so far? And have you learnt on your journey from Ellie Goulding right through to Pete Tong and hopefully into Maroon 5 in the coming few days?
Yes. There are a lot of challenges. I think right now where we are currently with restrictions, obviously the COVID factor plays a huge part in kind of the planning that has to go into putting a show on. And of course, for the Dewar show in particular, the whole cast and crew were kind of isolated in a bubble for a fortnight before the show. It adds a huge level of expense as well, with COVID testing and lateral flow testing and things like that, to make sure everything is 100% safe and COVID compliant. And I think also another part of it, and it was mentioned earlier, was that this model has just kind of come from nowhere and took the industry by sort of surprise, and a lot of the challenges actually comes from just doing the business, doing the deal, working out who's going to get paid and how, and which, how everybody kind of fits into this new world and brings these shows to life. So I would say that those are kind of have been the main challenges. Well, obviously, what we want to get to, and we'll hopefully be able to get to over the next few months, is slightly more of a hybrid model where we can have smaller numbers of people in a studio to watch whilst the streaming is happening. But whilst we can't do that, we are where we are. But what we are also doing is learning very quickly. We're learning how to do this and to reduce the costs and to plan in more effectively. We've got some suppliers and partners now that we're starting to really work with and get into a flow with, that really are helping us to drive down the costs and to ultimately make these shows as profitable as possible for all parties, but more importantly, and just as importantly, for the artists themselves.
Yeah, and just for those brands who haven't yet dipped their toes in the live streaming sector, how can they incorporate these virtual events into their campaigns? I mean, what do they have to think about, and who, you know, would be your key targets going forward? I mean, that might be market sensitive information which you don't have to reveal, but what's your thoughts about brands and how you target?
I mean, having come from and worked in brands and global brands myself in music, but then obviously before that I joined here at Monster Energy, and having done global sponsorship deals for huge festivals and tours across the world. You know, the one thing that is really great about what we're doing is that everything is completely transparent and trackable. We're working with American Express on our show with Maroon 5 at the end of the month, and you know what it allows American Express to do is to target a newer, younger audience base that you know sort of ticks a lot of boxes for their business KPIs. But things like brand attribution is a lot more flexible in a virtual environment than, you know, trying to sponsor a physical festival, for example, where, you know, you are one of many brands in a you know, big open space. And I think the links between the direct link of ROI or kind of sort of tracking of how successful your marketing is in a physical festival, for example, is a lot different to virtual. You know, we can tell our brand partners exactly how many people came to the platform, their demographics, where they were in the world, how much money they spent on e-commerce while they were on there, how much time that they spent in the stream before they clicked off. Did they interact with the live chat? How many of those people were watched together? You know, there's so many different facets to it, and so many different statistics that we can provide, and so much visibility that we can provide brand partners that they can actually, you know, really start to show the return on their marketing dollars. And I think that's really important. And as we move forward, you know, there's a lot of brands out there in a lot of different sectors that I think are you know, really prime for this kind of entertainment. And, you know, from drinks brands to supermarket brands to obviously in the financial sector to clothing brands, etc. There's lots of different ways that we can connect brands to audiences through our experiences.
Brilliant, James. Thank you very much. So keep your questions coming in. I can see a few questions have come in already. Thank you very much. Do continue to do that. Has that given you some food for thought? James will be joining the panel discussion after our final presentation today. And for that presentation, we're going to take a look at the National Theatre with Lisa Berger, who's been their Executive Director since April 2015 and was appointed Joint Chief Executive 2 years ago. Now, I know one of Lisa's primary interests is widening access to theatre, and over the course of her time at the National Theatre, she has done that through a variety of ways, including accessible ticket pricing, increasing the theatre's work on tour throughout the UK and internationally, as well as the refurbishment of the National's South Bank home and NT Future, of course, to make the building more open, which is impressive enough, although the biggest change to their audience's reach was Lisa's idea to film theatre for broadcast into cinemas, known as NT Live. I think you'd have to be living under a rock not to have heard of that before. Interestingly, NT Live is now in its 12th year, and you may remember that 4 weeks after the first lockdown, to the delight of many, including myself, NT Live transitioned into NT at Home, with audiences worldwide being able to access world-class theatre for free. Now, before we hear from Lisa, here's a trailer from the National Theatre which highlights how they make theatre for everyone.
Theatre. It can show us who we are, who we were, and who we could be. It means imagining bigger, understanding better, feeling together, on our stages and on tour, in schools and with communities, on cinema screens worldwide, and now at home. We are the National Theatre, and we make theatre for everyone.
Well, just watching that certainly reminds me that the National makes world-class theatre that's entertaining, challenging and inspiring. I've seen a fair few of their shows and plays over the years. So Lisa, welcome to Full Stream Ahead. Thank you very much for joining us today. And the floor is all yours.
Oh, Nadine, thank you very much, and to the Royal Television Society for inviting me to speak to you and share some thoughts on our recent developments with streaming, both on live and on demand. It's been so interesting already to hear the presentations from the other participants and think just how much we've learned along our journey as we go. National Theatre is a not-for-profit organisation, as you say, our mission to make world-class theatre, entertaining, challenging and inspiring, and reaching, really, really importantly, to reach that widest audience that we can. Just a few things on that. In the year before the pandemic, 8.7 million people engaged with the National Theatre's work, and I thought maybe first I'd give you a bit of a sense of what's behind that number. About a third of the audience is what we'd say is our mainstay as a theatre, working in person with audiences, artists, communities and young people. And in the year before the pandemic, we created 20 productions for our stages on the South Bank. You can see a few of them there. Presented work in the West End and on Broadway, and toured across the UK and internationally. So, for example, at the point of closure in March last year, we had 5 productions on stage or in rehearsal at the National. We're about to open the Lehman Trilogy on Broadway, and Warhorse was in Australia on the 3rd leg of a tour, which would have then gone on to Singapore, Korea and Taiwan. You can see on this slide that's up, we were working with communities in Doncaster and London on ambitious new works of participatory theatre through our programme Public Acts. And this was building on sustained partnerships with theatre and community organisations across the UK who share our vision for theatre as a force for change. We worked also with children, young people and teachers across the UK through our schools touring, our participation programmes and training and courses for 14 to 21-year-olds. And we invested in talent development, working with artists on over 100 projects in different forms of R&D that were being developed in the NT's New Work department and immersive storytelling studio. And in addition to the development projects, we supported them with attachments and bursaries and through apprenticeships in our production department. I always think the NT is in the same way, many ways, a big factory focused on different ways of telling stories and making work and getting that work out to people. So in addition to that in-person work, prior to the pandemic, we had 3 main planks of digital and broadcast engagement, which built on the core activity to take it to even wider audiences. The first that we were talking about at the beginning is NT Live. And it's our programme of 8 to 10 multi-camera broadcasts of productions a year in non-pandemic times, seen at 700 cinemas across the UK and in 65 countries internationally. We broadcast from our own theatres and from other theatres in the UK. And it plays a huge role in taking theatre as a group experience to wider audiences, mostly live, sometimes labelled as an encore or as an as live. The NT was one of the first companies in the event cinema market, and as you say, having celebrated our 10th birthday in 2019, it's become a really major part of our national and international audience reach. The second plank, if you like, pre-pandemic, is our digital and social platforms, but in the way we were using them before the pandemic, that included podcasts and short-form content like interviews and behind-the-scenes videos. And then our third strand is the National Theatre Collection. It's our education streaming offering, providing a wide range of recordings of shows available to UK state schools for free. And the free provision is paid for, in a business sense, through the commercial subscription service that's available to schools, universities and libraries worldwide. So that's where we were sort of on 15th of March last year. Of course, on the 16th of March, theatres across the UK lowered their curtains, dimmed their lights as a result of the pandemic. True, of course, for all arts institutions, cinemas and schools, who had all shut their doors as everyone isolated at home for the first lockdown. And at the National Theatre, we wanted to find ways to continue to share our work with as many people as possible. We were absolutely heartbroken, of course, like everybody, that the artists who are in the middle of rehearsing shows weren't able to keep going ahead. It's the making work is the thing in normal times that drives everyone's working lives. And we felt that we absolutely needed to find some way to get work out there, to bring people together and counteract that isolation until we could get people back into our theatres or cinemas. So on the 26th of March, 10 days after closure, we announced the new initiative, National Theatre at Home. And then from the 2nd of April, we'd stream an NT live production on our YouTube channel for free every week. And each production was screened live on a Thursday at 7 o'clock UK time, and then available on demand for 7 days after that. It was important to us to stream at the same time each week to create, where possible, that communal viewing experience. And we hope this would be an opportunity for people to share their enjoyment together online at a time when so many people were apart from family and friends. The first production we broadcast was Richard Bean's One Man, Two Governors, featuring a Tony Award-winning performance from James Corden. And over the course of the following week, when it was available to watch on demand, the production received 2.6 million views from the worldwide audience, equivalent to almost 3,000 performances in the theatre. I have to say, it was a number that completely staggered us, that there was that sort of a response to streaming our work on YouTube. And alongside the stream productions, the wonderful, wonderful broadcast team at the National Theatre were also able to produce accompanying content, such as live Q&As with the cast and creative teams, including very popular ones with Tom Hiddleston and James Corden, I seem to remember, post-stream talks, educational resources, and behind-the-scenes videos. And interestingly, providing more ways for our audiences to engage with us while our doors remained closed and give a sense of the NT being open, even though it wasn't. And we also delved into the National Theatre live archive and curated a programme with the great cooperation of our rights holders that we think was varied, so from comedy to new drama to classics. And we hope there was something for everyone to enjoy from their own homes and to indeed to try new things that they wouldn't normally. It was really a big live experiment, I felt, and we were able to get a real-time response from our audience. So that over the next 3 months, we screened 16 productions when they were over 15 million times, 173 countries, and fantastic for us, 40% of viewers were under 35. And we were completely overwhelmed, as I say, by the response. So for us, NT at Home was just a great initiative and a real example of how we adapted as an organisation to be able to provide arts and culture to people around the world in lockdown. And it was really uplifting to see audiences recreate the shared experience of visiting theatre in their homes, huge proportion tuning in at 7 p.m. each Thursday. Homemade tickets to interval drinks, the ways that people tried to recreate the shared experience even across different households. And although we streamed it for free, our audiences and supporters were incredibly generous during this time, with many making voluntary donations to the NT and partner theatres that we work with. And we paid fees to all the artists and creatives involved in these titles, which was really important to us at a time when so many freelancers and artists were not only unable to work, but unable to access any kind of financial support during the closure of theatres. I thought I might just give you a quick sense with a clip of what it looked like. And after this incredible response and having seen the appetite for stream theatre was there since the last stream finished in July, we were really determined to find a way to give our global audience access to our film productions online again, recognising it would be on demand. And to be frank, the income opportunity for us at the NT, as well as artists, was a really important consideration during this really difficult time. And just talking about income a little bit, in a usual year at the National Theatre, 60% of our income comes from the box office. That's across touring nationally, internationally, work on our stages at South Bank and National Theatre, as well as NT Live. And it's about 50% of our total expenditure is usually on our on-stage work, which goes from the beginning of development, securing rights, rehearsing, creating, producing, and for lots of our recent productions, filming them. So as we've been unable to generate this source of income from the box office during the pandemic, and has already paid for a lot of the associated costs, although not, of course, the rights, we were keen to explore how we could provide ourselves with another revenue stream, as well as answering the demand from our audiences and the opportunity to grow our audiences as well. And we were really lucky that because we've been broadcasting to cinemas worldwide for over 10 years, we've built up a large back catalogue of theatre productions, both from the National Theatre and our partner theatres. And then the other bit of really good fortune, in December 2020, Bloomberg's Philanthropies also came on board with us. And so we were able to launch a new on-demand streaming platform, which allows theatre lovers to subscribe and enjoy unlimited productions or pay to access single plays. So that's National Theatre at Home, and it's available to watch anytime, anywhere, online, TV, mobile and tablet apps. And we add more fantastic plays every month. So we launched in December with 11 productions, all productions captioned and have the options for subtitles. And we also offer titles with audio description because access remains such an important part of what we do at the National Theatre. And we've now got 18 productions on the platform, as I say, new titles being added every month. And they include Angels in America, Phaedra, which was the first ever NT Live with Helen Mirren, Medea featuring Helen McCrory and Michaela Cole, Yerma from the Young Vic with Billy Piper, and Othello with Adrian Lester. And in terms of continuing our support for artists, that very much has remained a priority for us when launching the new platform. As with H20 Live, we want to share the upside with the creative teams and performers who make the work. So we make an initial payment to artists for each production and then split the profits so that over 50% goes to the artists and our co-producing theatres. It's been, from our point of view, brilliant and really exceeded expectations, and great to see that the biggest proportion of our audience are subscribers, and so we hope are committed to the platform more long term. And so I guess finally, what's next? With the government's announcement that theatres can begin to reopen from mid-May, we are now back in a place to begin producing our live work once more on our stages. I can't wait to get back to live performance on South Bank, and we want to start making plans to get back on tour nationally and internationally. But until that moment, we can again safely undertake all the work that the NT was doing in 2019. We really hope NT at Home will continue to provide audiences with the power and joy of theatre for as long as it's needed. And I'm really excited about the future and how we keep evolving our offer, sharing more theatre and growing our audiences globally. Dean, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Fantastic to hear the plans as well. And National Theatre at Home, you mentioned you'll keep it going for as long as people want it. I'm surely, you know, it's out there now. You can't turn it back off again. So do you see that as an essential part of the mix going forward, that people will want to see National Theatre at Home, but also NT Live for the newer productions as well? So do you see a synergy with your live productions and your live streaming and your streaming going forward? Is that the plans, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. And I really hope that we found a sweet spot. As I say, I think having the live performance is really so hugely important to us, we love having people in a theatre, having them all together, experiencing the live. The work with the cinemas over the years has also been hugely important. Again, it brings people together, so there's the shared experience, the opportunity to talk to people you might not know about the work that you've just experienced. But clearly, on demand is huge for us, and the pandemic and the lockdown has given us this way of seeing just how large that is, and to grow a new audience for theatre, which is really exciting for the future.
It is. And Lisa, we've got a question in already from Tim Marshall, and he said, I enjoyed National Theatre's Of Mice and Men in the cinema. For the last critical shot, the TV director couldn't resist taking a tight 2 shot. Do you have conflicts between the theatre director and TV director?
Oh, it's really interesting. So of course, yeah, we bring in a TV director, and they sit and work with the theatre director. We choose different theatre film directors for each of the NT Lives, trying to match up the partnerships and also for the style of the show. Clearly, it's one of the really interesting things about the NT Live and the camera work, that you do get different shots and different experiences. And for the actors, of course, it's different, that the audience are being guided in a certain way, that they're going to experience it in a way that somebody sitting in an audience normally can look wherever they want to.
And it's diversification, isn't it? It's offering something different rather than an exact replica. So yeah, great question, Tim. We like that. Let's bring in our other speakers again, because we've got a few questions that have come in, and obviously do a bit of quick fire with you. Got a great question here about Studio 2054. Was arguably the most ambitious live stream project of the past year. This one is for you, James. What were the biggest challenges of that, and how close did it come to going wrong? Are you going to give us the PR version or the real version? Maybe it was fine. Are you on mute? Just double check. James, we can't hear you.
Not. Can you hear me?
That's it, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. No, I mean, I mentioned earlier, the biggest challenge was, the COVID situation, and the volume of people that had to come together to make that show happen. Dancers, performers, featured artists, as well as the crew and cast and everything. So that was probably the biggest challenge. In terms of how close it went to going wrong, to be honest, the show itself was seamless. We actually were victims of a cyber attack at the start of the show, and the robustness of our platform and the professionalism of our tech team, and just the years of experience that they had in the sports industry in terms of putting on live streaming of live sports events, meant that they were really well equipped to be able to deal with that, and the stream didn't go down. There wasn't a single glitch. The end users didn't notice that anything was happening, and we delivered a huge show to a huge audience. So I think we were all massively proud of our team after that.
Indeed, because obviously that cyber security challenge, yes, such a big ticketed event is going to attract people that will try and disrupt, and we've seen that a lot more so the last 2 to 3 years. And that just leads me on to another question. I'd imagine that the demographic of people watching your shows would know how to record a show and stream it on Discord or YouTube, for example. Is that also a concern? And do you have technology in place to prevent that?
We do, and piracy is obviously a huge issue for the industry, and it's a huge concern of ours. But it's one that we I'm working with our partners, certainly with management companies and labels. When it comes to YouTube, there's technology now that can flag any streams that pop up and take them down. As quickly as they come up. It does become a little bit like whack-a-mole in a way, but we have technology, and it's something that is developing all the time. So I think it's for us, a lot of people want to come and work with us. Labels and artists want to work with us because they know of our pedigree and track record in terms of our abilities to kind of keep pirates at bay as much as possible.
Yeah, indeed. And we've had a few questions in from Lisa Fairbanks. So Lisa, thank you very much indeed. And this I'm going to put to Mark, actually. So where's the money going to come from for producing events? Is it going to be record labels, brands, broadcasters? I mean, I imagine it's going to be a mixture, all of the above, and it depends on the artist. But Mark, you know better than me.
Well, I think you're right. It is going to come from a lot of different places, because we're really in a bit of a land grab for who's going to be the content owner. You know, so it's record labels can be making IP, which they then license elsewhere. TV networks and studios can be making the IP. The platforms can be. You know, often the platforms are acting in a more neutral way, but there's, you know, there are platforms that are looking at, you know, creating their own content assets and owning them. So it really is a case of, you know, sort of who is creating the content asset and what they want to do with it really affects us as a funding angle. One of the things we've certainly seen from the artist perspective that's really sort of started accelerating in the last few months of last year and onwards is artists are beginning to ask for, you know, sort of for, you know, advance payments, guarantees, and you know, which is sort of more replicates what they're used to in the traditional live business. So anybody who's in the business of putting on live shows is having to, you know, sort of build an increasingly large cash flow to be able to, you know, sort of to pay for all of that. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got platforms like Sessions, where it's really, you know, tiny little artists who there is no production value. It's them setting up in their, you know, in their bedroom or whatever it might be, and playing to sort of 50 to 100 fans who might be tipping them more, you know, or on Twitch, you know, artists, you know, DJing from their bedrooms, all those sort of things. So I think that there is no single answer, because the beauty of what live streaming brings is it can mean that there's a whole different types of shows that can be put on that would be much more difficult to put on in the traditional live sector, because in the traditional live sector you needed a venue, you needed a promoter, you needed some ticketing, and you don't need all of those assets. It helps if you've got them, but you don't need them.
And just another question in, Mark, handle this one as well. Does the licensing only work for live rather than catch up or on demand? Yeah,
so the main right, which is generally not getting paid at the moment, is for the songwriters, the performance of the songs. So the people that wrote the songs, and they typically get administered by the performing rights organisations. The PRS for music in the UK tried to roll out what it was hoping would be a global licensing framework that the other PROs would tap into, but that didn't really get anywhere. So it really is an absolute mess. It will need fixing, but fundamentally, if you're doing a global concert, before you perform that concert, you need to have technically deals in place with the PROs of every single country in the world if you're going to potentially have audiences in every country in the world. And that's clearly a nightmare scenario to be able to do that in a scalable way. You've got a lot of concerts to put on, etc. So we do need some sort of global licensing framework that's comparable to what we have in streaming music, at the moment, but we're, a significant way from there. And then, of course, once you've got the PPV VOD asset, then you've created a new master recording. So, then it's a case of who owns that master recording. And you might get some people sort of arguing, well, maybe it's a sync because there's video against it. So there's way more complexity than I'm qualified to talk about in terms of, what rights may come into play because we haven't yet determined exactly what the rights frameworks are.
And just to be clear, PRO, I think you say, is that performance rights? Performance rights?
Yeah, performing rights. So they're the organisations in every country that collect on behalf of songwriters. Yeah,
great. Just in case. We don't want to do too many acronyms here. We might be in the know, but we've got to share the love and everything else. Lisa, a question for you. Just thinking about National Theatre at home, it's such a good idea. So why didn't you do it sooner? And it seems easy to do, but did it take a lot of your time up before you managed to launch it in December to get it right?
Well, actually, the big thing was getting all the rights sorted out because, as Mark was saying, it's a really complicated and new piece of work that everybody's trying to get their heads around and wrestle with. The reason why we had a little bit of a head start was that we'd launched the education service, and it was really easier in the first instance to go from a cinema model to the education service, because I think everybody could get their head around that because it was about mission. But there was certainly something about just the focus of COVID, and then having launched it on the YouTube channel to then move from that to the new NT at Home service, sort of gave us the pathway, I think, to do it. But huge amounts of work on the producing side.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, that is nearly it. I'm just conscious of time. People have got busy schedules. Just finally, the title of the show is Full Stream Ahead. So is it full stream ahead, Mark? I know you've covered this off, but just a few final thoughts from each of you, just looking for a sentence each to wrap it up neatly. Mark, pick on you first.
This is probably like looking at Netflix 7 or 8 years ago. You know, some real promise, but the big game was still yet ahead. Indeed.
Yeah. James, how about for you?
I think I would echo that. The sands are shifting on a weekly basis, but I think it's definitely streaming definitely has a place and will be around for a long time to come. Just at what level is still yet to be seen.
Indeed, and it's glad we've booked you today, James. You're used to booking other artists, so we've turned the spotlight on you, James. It's been great to have you. And Lisa, your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I don't see us going backwards from what we've experienced over the last 12 months. It's a really important new audience, and I look forward to seeing how the industry adapts. So I talked about our R&D team at the Immersive Storytelling Studio. I think there's lots of new forms to come out of this.
Well, thank you so much to all our panellists on Full Stream Ahead. Thank you to Mark, James and Lisa. And before we say goodbye, just let you know about an upcoming free RTS event. Yes, on next Wednesday, the 31st of March at 7:30, we're broadcasting the RTS Big Telly Quiz, hosted by comedy impressionist Darren Altman. And this TV-themed quiz will be live with questions coming from across all regions and nations. And it's a chance for you to test your knowledge of all things telly and be thoroughly entertained in the process. Now, you can compete as a team or as an individual. I think I'd definitely compete as a team rather than by myself. Both of these events can be booked for free. Just go onto the Royal Television Society website, which I think you all know, but just as a reminder is rts.org.uk. And you'll also be able to find out what else we're featuring in our programme of events over the coming weeks and months. So until next time, on behalf of the Royal Television Society, thank you so much for watching Full Stream Ahead and for submitting your questions and comments throughout. Thanks again to Lisa, James and Mark for their company today. Take care and hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.